Hey everyone, and thanks for watching this edition of the If I Had a Podcast. Today, I and a few million others have been condemned to an internet shutdown. It's not a blackout because that sounds like some unfortunate, unforeseen event, but this was planned, so that's why it's a shutdown. We've been relegated to watching TV and listening to the radio. It's almost nostalgic, except for the fact that the atmosphere feels pre-apocalyptic yet pre-civilization at the same time. We are stuck in some sort of emphatic limbo. But what to do? I guess that's what they call the dichotomy of it all. A few years ago, and I think, this provides a not so conducive environment for us to evaluate how far we have come with dependency on the internet. If there is ever a time to study that, this is the moment to do that. And I think it's becoming more and more evident every day that we are increasingly depending on it. And it's now consolidating its place as a basic human need. And therefore, that means that we also have to talk about it being a human right. But otherwise, I don't know. Is it a right if you can't exercise it when you want to? Well, that's a question. There's a question there for you. Otherwise, we are feeling overly incapacitated because we are now highly dependent on the internet. But I'm planning to use this time, this pensive atmosphere, to do some work and maybe to shoot a little bit more episodes. And you'll probably see this when the internet is back on. But otherwise, I would like us to talk about death today. And I do not mean the mortification of this physical body. That's a little bit morbid, but still, death where is thy sting. I want us to talk about figurative death. And I can start by saying that maybe a few years ago, I was overly consumed by a dream. And, it was, I don't recall, and right now I cannot say whether it was me in the dream or the dream was in me, but I was consumed by it. And now looking back, I feel like I probably could have done a lot of things for that dream. I could have gone a lot of places for that dream because I was convinced to the very uttermost that it was either I have that dream, it was my only reason to live, so it was either I have that dream or what else am I living for? So I was locked in, as the kids would say these days. But then it didn't happen. That thing that I wanted and that thing that had consumed me as much didn't happen. And you can imagine. And to say that I was heartbroken would be an understatement. I held on to that news for a very long time, particularly because I had looped a lot of people in. I had pulled a lot of people in, and people were believing for me, people were supporting me. And so how do you break the news to that kind of people that, look here, it's not working. Things are not happening as we had expected. Because a lot was riding on it for me and for everything. And it was also certainly the answer that I was giving for a lot of the things I wasn't or was doing at that time. And that way it had also become an excuse of some sort. So I think holding on to the news also meant that I was, trying to live in that moment a little bit longer because I had, like I said, it had consumed me and I felt that it was the only reason that I wanted to be alive. It was the only thing that I really wanted to fulfill. And I do not recall the exact moment that hope I had became despair. But I do believe now, and looking back, I believe I experienced some sort of little death, and now that's something I'm going to talk about a lot today. Something we're going to call little deaths. I experienced a lot of little deaths then when that dream got shattered, and I do realize that a lot of those happen. Little deaths, I mean, the figurative deaths we're talking about, they happen, and some are good, some are bad, and some precede exponential growth, but also some, especially the bad ones, might precede brokenness. So the good ones are the ones you hear in the sermons all the time, about dying to self, about giving up things and habits, and those are also the kind of things you hear talked about adjacent to sacrifice. Every time you hear conversations about sacrifice, it's also very likely that you'll hear about dying to self in those circles. But I think little deaths are better than sacrifice, because in a way sacrifices might be unpleasant. They do not, however, they do not also have, it's not a must that they also must be pleasant, and they do not always require 100% connection to that sacrifice, because we've had stories of rejected sacrifices, and that's why I am elevating little deaths above sacrifices, because we all know that death requires a mortification of something, and it must be tied to whatever is living for it to be considered a death. Well, a sacrifice can be given and not be connected to it in any way. But little deaths require, first of all, to be complete. They require to be absolute and also irreversible or irrecoverable. And after that little death that I experienced with that dream that went crashing down, a few years later I experienced another little death, and that was a bad one. Well, a series of them actually, because I was in a place that felt constrictive. It might have been constructive, and probably I did not see it at the time. I did not appreciate that at the time. I just looked at what was before me. And what was before me was that I felt I wasn't able to do the things that I believed I could do. For example, podcasting is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but I felt in that place I couldn't do it. And so podcasting, among other things, there are connections and networks and relationships that I wanted to build. I started to modify those areas because I also strongly believed at that time that it was never going to happen. I felt constricted where I was. I felt held back, and I felt like there wasn't really an opportunity for me to do those things. And so I started to kill them off one by one and convince myself that I was not ever going to be happy. Not happy, but I wasn't going to ever have an opportunity to do them. And that can be dangerous because it takes away, it can consume you having not done those things, and it also overwhelms with a lot of regret. And when that changes and now you have the opportunity to be, all the circumstances surrounding your limitations change, then you're faced with a challenge, and the challenge is whether to resurrect those things, and how easy or how hard is it to resurrect, because death requires a mortification. And just like I've said, that it can happen and it's irrecoverable or it's irreversible. So what do you do in that case? How do you do that? And is it even possible? And then it becomes a scale. On one hand, with regrets, choosing a lifetime of regrets, or a lifetime of trying to catch up and trying to redo things from the past that you aren't able to do. But the good thing is that with good, the bad debts, the good thing is that if you are willing, there is an opportunity to always resurrect those things and undo those decisions, because a lifetime of regret and it can be, that's a harsh sentence. That's a harsh sentence of never keeping down the feeling that you failed at something, that you failed to try to redo it. Because the thing about those things, those little endeavors that keep us alive, is that they keep revisiting you, they keep revisiting your mind, they keep revisiting you in seasons when those opportunities always presented themselves. And I think that's the opportunity to try and redo those things, to try and reestablish yourselves. Only that it might take long, and it takes a lot of time, and if it's not done carefully, it can lead to panic, anxiety, because you're trying to catch up. Probably it was a time when you had that, because dreams are timely and there are seasons, and sometimes what draws us to those seasons is ourselves, but also having witnesses around us and seeing what people are doing in the same seasons. And when you see those people flourishing and thriving in the areas where you are equally meant to be doing the same, yet you're only starting out, well, that can be heavy. But I pray and I hope for all our sakes that we never run out of time. And I hope that these little endeavors that are often motivated by little debts that are bad and unfortunate may keep revisiting us for an opportunity to take them on and to accomplish something for ourselves, to keep ourselves alive, and to not worry that we failed or that we did not go through with what we were supposed to do, because in the end, little endeavors are things that, well, they're worth chasing. They're worth chasing and worth doing over and over again. So that's something that I wanted to talk about today. I hope that we get to have more meaningful conversations about this in the future. But otherwise, thank you for watching If I Had a Podcast, and thank you for watching this edition. Hope to see you on the next one. Bye for now.